Hello again, I'm Ariel, and you are about to experience a taste of the breakthrough process. And me and Erin Diaz, who's a yoga and meditation teacher, also have designed this process to support those of you who have been through maybe some challenging times. For instance, perhaps you've been through a tough breakup and it's hard to move on. Maybe you've had some serious health challenges and they've changed how you move through this world and how you feel in your body, and you're having trouble adjusting to that. You could have had a serious career change, like you lost your job, or maybe you just sense on the inside, like, I gotta have a career change soon because the way my life is working right now isn't working for me. There could be all kinds of reasons you need a breakthrough, including also if you're noticing something like a lot of dependence on alcohol, drugs, addiction to TV, to your screen, just those kind of self-soothing behaviors that after a little while you look and you're like, wait, this is my life going by. I know I'm built for something bigger than this. I know I want to feel more alive than this and more engaged. So that's another reason you might benefit from participating in this process. So basically, and Erin's about to go in a little more detail into what the process is and the really like the yoga philosophy that's behind this. And then we'll also intersperse that with some micro practices throughout the call. So you're not just learning about this, but we're actually going on a little journey of breakthrough together on this call. And one last note I'll make before I hand it over to Erin is just that it's so normal and it's so natural to get stuck. Sometimes we get stuck for a day, and sometimes we get stuck for a decade when something intense and overwhelming has happened to us. I specialize in trauma resolution, and trauma doesn't know time, and trauma doesn't care about time. You can have had something happen 20 years ago, and in your nervous system, it's like it happened yesterday. So we want to go into this with really a feeling of kindness, and Erin will guide you into this too, but real kindness and respect for whatever brings you to this call with us, and just like love for that part of you that's interested in evolving, even though it can be scary. All right, so bring your love and your breakdown. And I will hand it over to Erin now.
Hi guys. Let's see here. See if I can do this. Am I now like the main video for you guys? Yes? Did that work? Okay, cool. So hi. This has been such an amazing journey to be on with Ariel. I am somebody who often really kind of creates things on my own, in my own little workshop, in my own little mind, and then kind of presents them to the world. And I have learned so much about the breakthrough process through doing it with Ariel. And I'm really, really glad that it's brought all of us together. So I'm going to share a little bit with you about what the process is and how it works. I'm just fixing my hair here. Okay. So the process of positive transformation, which is what all of us really come to yoga and meditation and healing traditions for, right? We want to make these positive changes in our lives. This positive transformation process I've found is actually a really natural process. It's not something that we have to kind of reinvent every time. It's something kind of like your breath that like it wants to happen, right, on its own. And so a lot of the work that we're doing is really just creating the right context for this very natural process to happen, and making sure that we're doing it in an environment where there's as few obstacles as possible, right? So we're kind of removing obstacles and creating a nice environment, and then the work happens sort of on its own. And as we've been kind of trying to work this out, a framework jumped out at me actually, which I deeply study the Yoga Sutras, and I teach from them a lot. Some of you guys know that. And there's a framework in the Yoga Sutras that actually also shows up in Buddhism. And they're often called the four immeasurables, or the four abodes, or the four sublime states. And I'm going to tell you what they are here in a moment. But we were really struck by the fact that these four sort of ingredients, or these four steps, really linked up perfectly with how the transformation process, or the breakthrough process, actually works. So these four abodes, I love that they're called the four abodes, because they're like homes. They're like spaces that we create inside of ourselves and around ourselves that are conducive to the work. So the first abode is something called Maitri. And you may have heard of it in Buddhism. It's a slightly different language than Sanskrit. They use Pali. You might have heard it called metta, right? So you may have heard of metta meditation, right? This is the same thing as Maitri, and it means friendliness. And Patanjali in the Yoga Sutras, and also the Buddha talks about this as well. They pair friendliness with the state of sukha. And I'm going to talk more about each one of these. I just kind of want to set them up for you. But sukha is the experience of pleasure, the experience of ease, the experience of just well-being. Sukha is the inner experience, and we're going to feel into it in a few minutes. But it's that inner experience of all is well, right? All is well. And so when we encounter sukha, or when we want more sukha in our lives, the teaching here is to cultivate an attitude of friendliness. And so we're going to be cultivating that a little bit today, and very, very deeply on retreat. The second abode is karuna, and this means compassion. And compassion is paired in the teachings with dukkha. And dukkha, it's the sister of sukha. And for those of us who have bodies, we have sukha and we have dukkha, and they're kind of always fluctuating and going in and out. And dukkha is pain. Dukkha is discomfort, right? Challenge. And so the second abode is when we cultivate compassion for the challenges that just arise in life. They just do, right? And so this compassion piece is a way to hold space, create kind of a safe space, and a safe container for us to experience the pain of life without it turning into trauma. Sukha and dukkha are really personal, interior experiences, right? And so the first part of the retreat, we're going to be going really deeply. It's going to be a lot of embodiment work, and you're going to be going really deeply into your own inner world, your own inner experience. So this is something that we often don't really have the opportunity to access in the busyness of life. And retreat is the ideal place for doing this work. And through especially the beginning of the retreat, as you go inward and you do this work of friendliness for the sukha and compassion for the dukkha, we're also going to be able to really let go of some blockages that have built up, to release some old trauma, to release some old pain that you've been hanging on to, and to rediscover the sweetness of life that gets lost, to rediscover how good you do feel actually under the noise, under the surface, the peace that's already there. And then there are two more abodes, and that's what we're going to be focusing on the second part of retreat. The third abode is called mudita, and it means joy. And specifically joy it's paired with something called punya, which means virtue or success or victories, the wonderful transformations that we've already had, the amazing work we've already done. And if we don't do this piece, it's a celebration, mudita. And we're going to be celebrating, especially on Saturday night. We're going to have a feast. We're going to have a campfire. If we don't celebrate our victories together, we well, not only do we kind of live joylessly, which is no fun, but we actually miss out on the opportunity to amplify our victories, to create more of them. If we really can celebrate them, then we find that it's a lot easier to have more successes and more victories. And this is something that's best done in good company. The last abode is called Upeksha. And Upeksha means equanimity. And this is the kind of energy that we want to bring for apunya, for that means like the opposite of our successes. So this is what we want to bring for the things in our life that we've maybe labeled as failures or mistakes. We want to bring this ability to just see really clearly, right, with clear eyes, what the story was, what happened, what went down. And then with seeing with really clear vision, we get to actually learn. And that's why we make mistakes, right? So that we can learn from them. And once we cultivate upeksha and we can hold the space, we can hold a container for seeing what maybe did go wrong last time, that caused you suffering, to see really clearly what went down, then what we can do is we can grab the wisdom from whatever it is that's happened, and we can leave behind any regret, shame, right? And we'll find, and this piece is also best done in good company, we'll find that in the practice of sort of articulating our stories and embracing our stories from this wise perspective, that suddenly you're going to walk away from retreat with a much clearer sense of self and a clearer kind of purpose and sense of your purpose, and an ability to relate to others about it. And through the relating of your story with others, there's a healing piece that happens with that too. So before we go a little more deeply into this and do a little practice for each of the 4 abodes or the 4 immeasurables, I want you to just take a moment, maybe actually close your eyes, take a really deep breath in, and a nice smooth exhale out. Take a couple more breaths here. Feel yourself settling into this body, into the ease and peace that's here. And then I'm going to ask you to go ahead and feel into an intention for the rest of this hour together. Maybe there's one particular of those abodes, one in particular that you would like to have a deeper sense of or understanding. Maybe you want more clarity about where your breakthrough needs to happen. Whatever it is, feel into it now. And then whenever you feel ready, you can open your eyes, and I'd like for you to just write down whatever that intention is.
And for those of you, if you're new to taking on prompts and listening to your intuition, know that there's no wrong answer here. So at this point in my practice, when Erin gives such amazing prompts, when I hear a prompt, usually, whom, the words just come up, and I just don't doubt them when they come up. So if you're newer to this kind of work, you can just trust what comes up and put that down and let it be the point of exploration. because we're going into conversation not just with your mind, with your cognitive processes, we're going into conversation with your whole being here, which is way more intelligence. And you might need to listen to some places that are less obvious in this work. Aaron, you want to go a little deeper into my tree and then I'll share a little practice with them to taste it, a little taster?
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, totally. Okay. So when we're having an experience like the ones that Ariel was bringing up, and like the ones that, many of you, when you signed up for this, you wrote about where you need a breakthrough to happen, and some of you wrote about these really challenging life experiences that have come up. When that happens, it's very natural, right? It's scary. It's scary, right? It's our world shifting. It's the prelude to a very positive transformation when we go through a crisis. But at the time, it feels new. It feels different. There's a shedding of what was, and there is a very clear call into the unknown, and that's scary. And when that happens, our relationship to sukha, or pleasure, pleasant sensations, our relationship to sukha can start to come to the surface. And one of the things that we often see is when we're freaked out, we tend to cling to the ways that we get pleasure, right? So Ariel mentioned, like over drinking, or like, going to the screen more often than usual. This is a very natural and normal response to crisis. And apparently it was in Patanjali's time, in the Buddha's time as well, because he speaks of this, that in a different section of the Yoga Sutras, than where he describes the four abodes, he says, Patanjali tells us in the Yoga Sutras that when we get overly attached to certain sources of pleasure, it creates suffering. It's called raga, and it's basically over attachment or addiction. Yeah, codependency. And so in that sort of clinging, the sukha itself isn't a problem. Pleasure is part of life. Same way dukkha, not a problem actually. It's just part of life. Pleasure is actually just how the body gives you information about what's going on and telling you things are going okay. And the little pleasures that we get from from that cookie or whatever it is, those aren't bad either. But Patanjali tells us the issue comes with the way that we're grasping, right? And in the ways that we're clinging, in this kind of sense, like, I want my pleasure now. I don't want it to ever stop, right? And that's when we start to get into these sort of numbing patterns and sort of avoidance patterns through kind of grasping after sukha. And so this has been a really interesting, very fruitful practice for me. I've been going through major breakthrough, major transformation in my life, and I've seen all this stuff come up for myself, right? And it might be a little counterintuitive, but what I do when I do give myself a little pleasure, when I do give myself that, cappuccino or whatever in the afternoon, I do a Maitri practice with it. Friendliness. What's friendliness, right? Welcoming, open armed. Oh, so grateful to see you and be with you. And rather than kind of scarfing down the cappuccino with like a little bit of guilt and like, oh, I shouldn't be doing this, or, and I'm like, this is awesome, right? Here we are, you and me, old friend, right? And really, really savoring the sukha, knowing that I deserve it. The issue is when we experience sukha in a non-friendly context without Maitri, when Maitri is not an ingredient in the room, when we're having a pleasurable experience, it tends to be mixed with dukkha, like really mixed with dukkha. Do you know what I mean? Like there's a shadow to the pleasurable experience. But if we can practice Maitri with it and really, really enjoy it, like really give over to the pleasure of the experience, we find we when the coffee's done, I'm actually satisfied by it. I don't then want another one because I kind of like guiltily rushed through this one and it didn't actually give me the sukha. It didn't give me that deep sense of ease and joy. So I want you guys to be kind of playing with this and practicing that throughout your week. And then just in general, embracing the experience of sukha, of ease, this natural state of wholeness. Another thing that happens when we're going through crisis or we're suffering is all we can see is the suffering. And we forget. Like another sukha practice and Maitri practice is to look around the world for everything that's right. Look inside you for everything that's whole, right? Maybe this little part over here is broken, but everything else is okay. And so tapping into that is really important. And we're going to do that really deeply on retreat. The beginning of Saturday is going to be just like yummy sukha Maitri retreat land where we're going to go really deeply into the ease and the wholeness. Ariel?
Yeah. Yum yum. That's why like if I'm gonna have chocolate cake, like I'm gonna get like the $9 slice of chocolate cake. I'm not gonna go to the deli and get a ring ding, you know? Like I want to immerse myself in the chocolate cake. But how we can bring this into your practice right now and a really the studying the ancient philosophies is so fascinating because right now so much of the subtler science is actually able to explain why these things are true. And what Erin's talking about, which is so important, is when you fully allow yourself that feeling of sweetness, of pleasure, of friendliness, it brings you into what's called your ventral vagal system. It actually brings online all of your pro-social, your social engagement system, your feeling of connection to other human beings, your feeling of support and relationship to tribe, and those good feelings inside you, which gives you choice. And when you're stuck in fear and pain and aloneness, and I'm not allowed to enjoy anything, you're thrown back in your dorsal vagal system, and that puts you in this freeze state. And it's really hard to make change, any positive change, when you're stuck there. So this is a really important part of knowing that you're going to look at something that was hard for the human animal that you are to be in, and that you've survived, but some part of you might feel like you haven't survived completely, which is why you're stuck. You're not able to go to the next level. So here, let's just do a tiny little Maitri practice. First, will you make yourself really comfortable wherever you are? Because allowing yourself comfort is like Maitri 101. Like I just put an extra cushion behind my back. I'm actually throwing my leg up. This leg wants to go up on that side of the couch. I have a sip of coffee from my K for Kylie cup. I'm going to flash it again during the Karuna part. K for Karuna. So first, get comfy wumpy. I love it. I'm seeing people get on the floor. Put your Snuggie on. And I've resisted this practice for a while, but this one really works. It's simple and it really works. So once you get in a comfortable place, first just feel the inhale and exhale in an enjoyable way. So it's not forced. It's just the simple pleasure of breath. And your eyes can be opened or closed. And then curl up the corners of your mouth just a bit. So just the slightest, sweetest smile. This is the kind of smile I love to give my nieces, or I love to give a friend across the room. Just a really sweet smile. And notice how being in this comfortable place, simply enjoying the rhythm of your breath the way you might watch cattails or tall grass sway back and forth. And engendering this facial expression of everything is okay. Everything might be even better than okay. Notice how that changes the chemistry in your own body. Welcome, the sukha. And if you've gotten a little taste of that, you can gradually come back toward the screen. And I just love finding cost-free, consumption-free ways to find sweetness. It's really there for you. It's really there for you. You don't need all the bells and whistles for it. All right, I'm going to hand it back to Erin, where we are going to get into Karuna. Do it.
Okay, can you hear me? Yeah? Okay, cool. Karuna, compassion. You know, dukkha is a part of life, right? Discomfort, unpleasant sensations. One of the main models for the breakthrough process, as I was studying, you know, how do these positive transformations happen, is birth. I've done doula work, so I've been in the room while babies are being born, and it is a process that has a lot of dukkha for the mom, you know, and I've learned that that's okay, right? It's okay. Not only is it okay, for some reason, I didn't come up with the way that nature works, but whoever did, right? The universe decided that there's going to be some challenges to being an embodied being. There's going to be some discomfort, and that's part of the process. We all came here through a challenging, but ultimately beautiful situation, right? Called birth. There's a mistake that many of us make unconsciously, which is that we need to avoid dukkha. That a good life would be one that's all sukha, no dukkha. But that's just not the way it is. Just not how it is, right? Dukkha actually comes with really, really important gifts, right? The discomforts we feel in our body come with information about where our attention needs to go, right? Emotional discomfort comes, there's different, for different emotions, they come with different information, right? Anger comes up often when it's like, yo, you need some boundaries, right? And that's the information that tells you that there's something that needs to be put up there, right? Sadness is an experience of a really deep love and letting us understand our interconnections. There's so many gifts from all these kind of uncomfortable things. And so the yogi, the wise one, the one who's interested in healing and growth, instead of trying to live their whole life kind of running away from dukkha, which just doesn't work, right? We learn how to turn toward it and say hello. And the space that we want to meet the dukkha in is one of compassion. The word compassion literally translates to being with suffering. Calm, right? Like together, community, right? Coming together. And passion, suffering or emotional experience. And so the very first thing we learn is you have to be with it. You have to actually make space and time for hanging out with your dukkha. And retreat is the perfect space and time to do that. Because Ariel and I are going to help you create an environment of compassion. And through the exercises that we lead you, and we're going to wake up your natural compassion inside. We're going to wake up a little bit of it today. All 4 of these abodes, you all are already within you. You already have access to them. It's just a matter of learning how to kind of turn them on and learning the right situations for turning them on. And so in the space of compassion, dukkha can arise in a way that it can offer us all of its gifts. When we experience something uncomfortable or painful, when this ingredient is missing, we get trauma, right? So for instance, in the birth room, right, as the doula, I am creating this safe space of compassion for the mom. If somebody comes in the room, for instance, who's like a doctor or a nurse who's being really brusque or just not respectful, one of my jobs is to kind of like help keep the atmosphere and keep everyone in the room compassionate toward the mom, right? Otherwise it can start to it can be a very traumatic experience. But as long as compassion is present, we can go through something really challenging, and we don't take with us a trauma. We don't hold in our bodies or our nervous system this memory, like Ariel said, that will just stay with us and with us and with us and keep coming up. And so these techniques you can use to kind of be metabolizing challenging experiences while they're happening, but we're also going to use it to go back and meet these experiences. You'll know what they are because they keep arising in your consciousness because they're kind of trapped. They're waiting to be resolved. They're waiting for you to make the space and time, right? Maybe in a couple weeks, 2 days, we'll do it, right? For you to make the space and time to be with it and hang out with it and acknowledge the suffering. And once we turn toward it, we can actually process it and let it go. Ariel?
Yes. Another thing I was just thinking when you were talking about being in the delivery room is it's really important that you have people around you that have made peace with suffering themselves, because often what happens in medical environments, and I especially have noticed this when I've been in a hospital supporting loved ones, and there's certain young nurses or other people, it doesn't really matter the age, who aren't okay with suffering. They're going to jump to medicate instead of giving the pain time to work through. There are weird sounds that come with childbirth. There is moaning and groaning and screaming and wailing, and those same sounds I think you have all probably made in your version of childbirth, the pain of transformation, right? And I think one of the really cool things, there's actually a lot of teachers on this call, and I bet some of you who aren't technically yoga teachers hold this space for other people, is finding the people and the environments that are like, your pain, how your pain expresses itself and moves through is okay with me. I have the capacity to be with your pain. And that's really the hallmark of having been through it and out the other end yourself, and knowing it's not it doesn't have to be a threat if we're working with it in a titrated way in a safe environment. So let's do a little tiny bit. Let's do just a little bit. So for our little mini Karuna practice, what I would love for each of you to do is pull in that benevolent, compassionate, witnessing presence that you felt a little bit of when I asked you to imagine looking at a kid, that energy you bring when someone's going through a hard time, but you're there for them. So that compassionate presence, we'll keep that going. And I want to offer that to you all too. And then you can do this with your eyes open or closed. Just sense your body, do a little body scan. And feel where in your physical body this breakdown, So wherever the discomfort of unfinished change lives in your body. For some of you, it might be very subtle. For some of you, it might have symptomized in different injury or illness, and we are not here to judge it or say it should or shouldn't have happened. We are just here to make space for it to be. And you get to choose how much you want to feel it. Sense where in your body it lives, and then just very gently bring one of your hands, whichever hand has the kindest energy in it, and rest it on that place in your body. Where you sense some of the discomfort, some of this unfinished business. And simply be with it. Hold it there and be with it without needing it to change in the slightest. And you can even take this further by emphasizing your inhale. The inhale is including, it's saying yes, it's making space for what is. You're not alone. The nicks and bruises come with being in a human body. And have one extra long inhale. And then just lightly sigh it out. And release your hand and just notice how you feel. And if there is some residual feeling from there, that's totally fine. It's naturally going to move into the next part of our call. If you need to wiggle your buns around a little bit, or wiggle your shoulders, or wiggle your nose, wiggle your ears, that works too. All right, I'm handing it back to Erin.
Thank you for that, Ariel. That's beautiful. Yeah, so I hope that you guys continue to play with these karuna practices, and as you meet your own dukkha, what if you could, when you feel it, go and say, "Oh, sweetheart, I'm here, I'm listening." When you do experience suffering, really bringing this kind of tenderness and sweetness, and see what happens. The third abode is mudita, and mudita is the joy that really naturally arises when we encounter good things in the world. And while sukha and dukkha are really internal experiences, it's really your embodied experience. And the experience of punya and apunya kind of happens out in the world. And being in the context of a sacred community, which is what we form every time that we get on a call like this, which is what we form every time that we do a retreat or go to a yoga class, you're joining a sacred community. And in that space, we get perspective on where we actually are in our journey, right? That feeling when you come together with a wise person, and in the sharing of your story, in that context, you start to understand yourself better. And so mudita is the experience of joy that amplifies, that celebrates, that pauses and goes yes to all of the good things that you've already done, all the great changes that you've already had, that you've already made possible. Even just doing the work of friendliness towards towards sukha, and compassion toward dukkha, even that is something that we can pause and applaud, and we will on the retreat. It's not easy to face our suffering. It's not easy to allow the pleasures of life to come and go and not cling to them. And so that really mature, beautiful work that we do needs to get celebrated. One way of looking at all of the spiritual work that we do is that under the surface of all the actions that we take in the world and the words that we say, there's a feeling, there's like a vibration. And when we get in the room, you've experienced this, I'm sure, when you go into some spaces, anxiety might get amplified, right? If you're around somebody else who's really anxious, if you're in an environment that doesn't have these qualities in the environment very much, right? And likewise, when we enter a space with others that are doing good work, like everyone who's going to come to this retreat is like showing up and doing the good work. And when we sit around and look at each other and go, man, that is awesome. It takes this vibration of goodness and virtue. Punya is the word in Sanskrit, of the goodness in us. And it amplifies it. It makes a chorus of it. And then the awesome thing about mudita is that when I sit and I applaud you for you doing your awesome work, and you applaud me, right? What happens is that we create this container that just becomes really, really rich and thick with joy. So much of what we fear when we're having a crisis or going through a big transformation is that where we're going to land on the other side isn't going to have joy. And so if we can cultivate this quality all together, even while we're going through the crisis, we come to realize that joy is part of your natural state. It lives within you all the time. And all that you really have to do, if you need to find it again, it doesn't matter where you are in your breakthrough process. It doesn't matter how much sukha is present and how much dukkha is present. If you can find somebody, some other wise, loving being to hang out with and really like share your successes with, you will tap into that joy. Ariel, handing it back over.
Yeah. You know what I was thinking of while you were talking about that was Game of Thrones. Like, even if you haven't seen Game of Thrones, Game of Thrones is a bloodbath, right? Heads roll that you're like, I loved that character. And still, at the end of any big battle, even when a brother was lost, a sister was lost, there has to be a big feast. Like, they get together, they light the lanterns, they get out the goblets, they throw a party. And it's HBO, so there might be some nudity involved. But this is a really, really important part of our nature as human beings to, even though it was hard, even though we lost some things along the way, we still have to celebrate how far we've come and do it together. And that amplifies it and gives us the strength to get up and move on to the next day. So for just a little bit of celebration here, will you please first just bring your hands together and rub them together. So you're just building a little heatorama. And then clap your hands. Give yourself a round of applause. And smile. And say, gosh, I'm doing awesome. Gosh, I'm doing awesome. And then pat yourself on the back and be like, dang it, I am great. I am great. I showed up today. You know what? The rest of my life might be a shit show, but here I am with a couple yoga teachers trying to make it work. And then wiggle out your wrist, do a little wrist wiggle. And then just do a New Jersey fist bump. Be like, yeah, whoop, whoop. Can you go whoop, whoop? Hey, David, who has the rescue poodle farm, I want you to whoop loud enough for the poodles to come. Whoop, 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 whoop. Ow, ow, ow. There could be some light howling, okay? No pressure, but there could be just a little. And then take it down. Take it down, take it down. I like to dance. If you saw my Instagram feed earlier, I did a dance to Rebel Yell by Billy Idol because I just needed to get out all the energy of working on these things all morning. Anyway, I encourage you to have a dance party later. But as you settle in, you can just close your eyes and feel your gratitude for your repeated choice to show up and do the work to answer to your highest potential. It's the showing up that counts. It's not how fast and how far your progress is. It's the showing up that counts. That's the thing you can control. And love yourself for that. And we got one more phase in our breakthrough introduction. Take it away, Erin.
Unmute. There we go. So yeah, we do. We have one more abode, and it's upeksha, which is equanimity, is usually how it's translated. And this is paired with apunya, which is when things don't go well, right? When there's actions out in the world, either by you or by somebody else that do cause a little harm or cause a little suffering or cause more dukkha, right? And this is so important, this one, because of course apunya in the world is scary, right? The traumas that we walk around with, the old stories of pain that live inside of our bodies, you know, looking at where they came from is actually really important, because until we look at where the suffering came from, we don't know how to prevent more of it in the future. And so whether the apunya is something that you say, oh, I made a mistake that caused my suffering, or someone hurt me, in a tender moment, and that caused my suffering. Whether it's the universe itself, right? That you say, why is there sickness, right? Universe, why is there death? Why are these difficulties? Whatever it is that whatever the kind of story is behind it. Upeksha, the ability to kind of have clear vision on what's going on, to have that clear understanding, allows us to gain wisdom. The mistakes of life, right, are where we really learn. And this is actually where the upgrading, the up-leveling really, really happens. So often we're spending our time trying to chase after praise, kind of chase after to be a perfectionist, right? To always have to be the one who has the most punya or the most virtue or the most goodness and the most successes. And we spend a lot of time kind of running away from failures and fearing failure and fearing mistakes. But the fact of the matter is, through making the mistakes and then being able to look back with clear vision and hang out with what went down, we become someone who can live in these four abodes no matter what is happening. And we become that wise being who can hold space for others as well. I have definitely spent most of my life trying to be this perfect thing. But it's really through my challenges that I've discovered my own life purpose, which is to hang out with people who are going through challenging things and support them, essentially. And if I hadn't made a million mistakes on my own, if I hadn't gone through all, like fallen down a million times and gotten myself back up, I would not have this capacity at all. And just like Ariel was saying, for Karuna, it's so important that we've been through it and that we trust this process, and that we trust that we're going to get through the pain. The pain's okay. We don't need to overly medicate it right away, right? It's the same thing with upeksha. We become somebody who, when someone else fails, we don't come and go, oh my gosh, that's terrible, right? We go, yeah, I made that one too, and we can be just like real. We're not in denial. We're like, oh no, you didn't make a mistake, right? We're not lying. Like, we're like, oh yeah, I see what you did there. I see how that hurt. We get really clear and really honest, but there's no judgment in this abode. There's no judgment in this space, and no shame and no guilt and no regret. It's okay. So this is what went down. And now we're going to take that wisdom and we're going to leave behind all those bullshit stories, right? We don't need them. We can just go right for the jewels of wisdom when we have upeksha.
I love this phase because I feel like this is where all the fun stuff really happens, though. Like the humor happens. Like, when you can make a great joke about some terrible foible that you did, like that. I remember when I went through a wretched breakup 8 years ago. At first I was so self-conscious about it that I would kept changing the story, like to one that felt better for my body. And now I love to joke about how it felt like this person leaving was like a shark biting off my entire arm and shoulder. Like I had bloody entrails just streaming down the street behind me. Like, and there's something to me so funny now in my ability to include what actually happened, to include all of it in my experience, and therefore to relate to other people who are going through hard stuff. And like there does, I think, become that feeling of, so what? So things are good. So what? So things are bad. So what? Here we are. Can I get you a glass of water? So for this last mini practice together, and one more side note is I don't even like to hang out with people who haven't been through hard stuff anymore. Like my favorite people, like young people, are pretty boring unless they've been through a lot of stuff. Like I like to hang out with people that are a little beat up and we get to talk about it, joke about it, dance about it, cry about it, and live life together. So anyway, let's do one more mini practice together. And this is where in the retreat, it's really like the closing circle feeling. At the end of retreat, we love to take time to just be and reflect and share. Often we like to make space, me and Erin, in retreat for all the voices to come forward and share some of what they've been processing over the time. And even though you're not all speaking on this call, this has been a little mandala, a little tiny oasis, a little retreat through Zoom video we've been doing together. So we can still settle our energies together. And this is what I encourage you to, the position for your hands is actually to rest with your palms up. And you can bring them to rest on your legs, just with your palms up. Or if it feels nice and organic to you, you can even lift them, and I'm going to lift them a little higher so you can see, but you can even lift them, I'll show you, a bit above your leg. So it's like this gesture, it's actually a mudra, the gesture of being available to both give and receive, having your palms up like that. And with your palms up, lightly close your eyes again, just so you can feel how this mudra, this physical pose, affects your physiology, affects your body, your mind. And imagine that you're sitting in a room. And you can imagine that you're sitting in the room you're literally sitting in right now. Or you can imagine that you're sitting in some other kind of room or house. Some people have very illustrative imagination, so you might just suddenly find yourself in a different kind of room. And imagine that this is the space of your consciousness. And it's actually the walls and the ceiling and the floor represent the space of what you will allow in your experience, what you will allow yourself to feel, what you will allow others to feel in your presence. And imagine now, as you breathe, have an inhale, and on the exhale, imagine that the walls push out a little further. And then pause and inhale. And imagine that the ceiling lifts a little bit more. And take several more rounds of inhale and exhale. And on every exhale, just imagine the space that you're in, the space of your consciousness, getting a little bigger. Plenty of space for all parts of you. Plenty of space for the whole rainbow of your human experience. And when you feel that the walls and the ceiling are at about the right distance, you don't have to push them back too far, just a little more space. You can come on back. So, thank you all so much for joining us. What I'm going to do in a moment is actually turn off the recording. So if we want to have a little chat together, we can do that with the recording off. I will just say a reminder, we are doing this full weekend retreat in 2 weeks, the 27th to the 29th at Mount Tremper Arts Center. And it's Friday night to Sunday midday. And it's going to be a wonderful weekend-long ritual for you to take something really meaningful that you want to transform. It's time for a breakthrough on, and bring it into the space of retreat and move it gradually through a whole array of yoga and meditation practices, so that you can really affect some serious change. Because sometimes it's time. It's time for that chapter to end and the new one to begin. And showing up for your practice big time, in our experience, is the most powerful way to bookend yesterday and begin tomorrow. So check out forevermarvel.com, or you can just email one of us if you want more info. And I'm about to stop the recording. Do you want to say anything before I do, Erin? No? Okay. Stop.